Hello and welcome to ONET Academy. This previously recorded webinar is part of the ONET Academy webinar series, a set of online training presentations. This webinar recording, an ONET Academy briefing, ONET tools for school counselors, counselor educators, and other career development professionals, will start momentarily.
Gary, thanks very much, and welcome to all of you. I'm happy to have you with me today for the webinar that is devoted to the ONET tools for school counselors, counselor educators, and other career development professionals. My name is Janet Wall, and I am an independent consultant working in the area of career development, assessment, program evaluations, workforce development, occupational information, and related topics. One of my clients is Mayer & Mayer, and I've been developing and delivering webinars for them for a number of years now. And so I'm very happy to do this webinar with you today. I have two major goals that I'd like for us to accomplish during this time together. And the first is to show you how ONET materials and services can support the various professional career development guidelines and major documents that are out there in the field. And also then to review the free materials and services that school counselors and career development professionals can use within their career development programs to actually support what they're doing and enhance what they're doing. So the three documents that I think have quite an influence on what school counselors and counselor educators and career development professionals are sort of, in a sense, bound by are first, Vision into Action, which are national standards for school counseling programs, and this is an effort by the American School Counselors Association. Then there's the National Career Development Guidelines that are similar to the ASCA standards, but these are put out by the U.S. Department of Education. And then, of course, we have the Perkins Career and Technical Education Improvement Act. So all these three major efforts kind of impinge upon what school counselors and counselor educators and other workforce development professionals are doing back where the rubber meets the road with students and with clients. So I want to go over each of these three things kind of quickly to set a bit of a background. And again, first is Vision into Action, which is the American School Counselor Association program. And again, these set standards for school counseling programs that school counselors attempt to adhere to so that they can actually provide a high-quality career development program for their students. Vision into Action is divided up into three major areas: academic development, personal social development, and career development. And although all three areas are important to what we do in our work, I want to focus mostly on the career development standards. If we take a look at those, there are three standards. Standard one is that students are going to gain the skills to investigate the world of work in relationship to knowing about themselves in order to make informed career decisions. And then, second standard, that they're going to employ strategies to achieve future success in careers. And the third is that they're going to understand the relationship among their personal qualities, this whole notion of education and training, and how all that relates to the world of work. The National Career Development Guidelines, you can see, are, at least in terms of the three major areas, are pretty similar. Instead of calling them standards, the National Career Development Guidelines call them domains. And so the first domain is personal social development, the second is educational achievement and lifelong learning, and the third is career management. And we're going to focus on the career management skills or objectives, even though those other domains are relevant to what we do as well. But you can see the career management standards here: to create and manage a career plan that matches up with their career goals, to use a decision-making process as one of the components of their career development, to use accurate and current and unbiased information about careers for their planning and for their career management, to master the educational employability skills that are required to advance in their employment, and to integrate changing employment trends and society's needs and economic conditions into their career plans. So basically what this is saying is that people who are undergoing a career development process need to know what is happening out there in society, what's happening out there in the workplace, what's happening in terms of occupations and the changes that are occurring in the U.S. economy as it relates to the world of work. Perkins has some similar goals, and the Perkins Act is basically providing funding for schools in the career and technical education arena. And the focus for Perkins is, again, on employment statistics, information on industries, career awareness and planning, education and training, focusing on in-demand occupations or high-demand, high-wage occupations, and then making sure that the decisions that are made, everything is aligned in terms of objectives and industry requirements with regard to the plans, the education and training for what the U.S. economy needs. So O-Net, in all of its resources, provides support to those three documents or efforts that I just got through talking about. It provides unbiased and accurate information. It provides information on wages, both on the national level and also on the state level. It documents occupational trends and provides information on the outlook for occupations. Is the occupation growing? Is it declining? It provides assessment tools so that a person can understand more about their own characteristics and match that up to the world of work and use that in the career decision-making process. Shows how education and training relates to occupations. It supports decision-making by providing credible information about occupations and industries and job information. And it includes in-demand occupations and even emerging occupations. So always watching to what's happening in the future, always trying to provide the latest and best information about occupations so that good decisions can be made. So what is O-Net? Well, basically, O-Net is a database of occupational information. It is updated using information from job incumbents. It's updated frequently, a couple times a year, basically. It's updated using industry information. So it is, right now, the most comprehensive set of information on occupations that exists. It also comes with a lot of supporting tools, comes with, I mentioned, assessments, job information, financial aid, and what we're going to focus on today is the user-friendly version of that database, which is O-Net Online. All right. The database is available for you to utilize, so if that matches up with what your needs are, you can go right to the database and do planning and research with that. But the user-friendly version of O-Net Online provides you just an enormous amount of information that I think you can use in the work that you're doing with students and clients. And I'm going to show you some tools using O-Net Online and some other supporting information that can help you do the job better. So the first tool that we're going to take a look at is to find occupational information. And what we would do is go to O-Net Online, which is online.onetcenter.org. And if you go to that website, you see basically that there are three major entrance ways to O-Net Online. The first is Find Occupations, the second, a skill search, and the third, a crosswalk search. And for right now, we're going to focus on the Find Occupations aspect. So we would click on Find Occupations, and that brings us to a portion of the website that looks like this. Let's start with the top right-hand portion, Browse by Job Family. The O-Net occupations are divided up into groupings called Job Family. So if you're interested in a particular job family, you can go right to that grouping and see occupational information within that grouping. A second way to gain occupational information is to browse by high-growth industry. The U.S. Department of Labor, in cooperation with people in the various industries, have identified several industries that are high-growth, in-demand occupations and industries. And you can search within each of those categories from this particular page as well. Moving down to the bottom right, we can also browse by STEM discipline. And that is by taking a look at occupations that relate to science or technology or engineering or mathematics areas. So again, if you're interested in those kinds of categories, you can take a look at the occupations and industries that relate to those. Moving to the left-hand column at the bottom, you note that you can actually what's called browse by ONET descriptor. And we're actually going to do a little bit of that a bit later in this webinar. But you can take a look at things like knowledge, skills, abilities, and so on, and find occupations that match up with those characteristics. We're actually going to do an interest area search to show you an example of how you would approach this browse by ONET descriptor function. But what we're going to do right now is focus on the quick search. And that's either by entering a keyword or ONET SOP code into that little bar. And what I've entered there is the word nursing. And you can actually put in a particular occupational title, or you can just do a keyword. And I'm using a keyword of nursing because I want to show you the kinds of things that come up in doing that type of thing. So we put in that word and we click on Go, and up comes a listing of occupations that match up with that word nursing. And so you can see that first on the list comes nursing instructors and teachers post-secondary, and then nursing aides, orderlies, and attendants, registered nurses, licensed practical and licensed vocational nurses, psychiatric aides, and so on down the line. You can see that there are several occupations that come up, and basically what this function is doing is saying, all right, you put in the word nursing, all right, which of these occupations do you really want to know about? So you look through that list and say, oh, this is the one that I want to know more about. And we're going to do that. But before we do that, I want to make sure that you see that little green logo in demand where all those red arrows are pointing. And certain of the occupations within the ONET system have been identified as being the high-growth, in-demand occupations. And so in the ONET system, they have keyed those or identified those by that in-demand logo. All right, so we look at the list, and in this instance, what we're going to be interested in is looking at licensed practical and licensed vocational nurses. So we would click on that occupational title, and we would get more information. But you can do that. You can click on any of these occupational titles and get further information about that occupation. All right, so we're clicking on licensed practical and licensed vocational nurses, and up comes what's called a summary report for that occupation. And the summary report has an enormous amount of information about the occupation. It has tasks, tools and technology, knowledge, skills, abilities, work activities, work context, job zones, interests, work values, related occupations, wages and employment, and additional information as well. All right, so we can see that for this occupation, we're taking a look at the tasks that are associated with that occupation. And you can see that the first task that's listed there is observe patients, charting and reporting changes in patients' conditions, such as adverse reactions to medication or treatment, and then also administer prescribed medications or start intravenous fluids, answer patients' calls and determine how to assist them, and so on. So the various tasks that a licensed practical and licensed vocational nurse does are listed there. But then there's more information as well. If you continue to look at the summary report, you see that tools and technology are provided. Now, one little caveat here is tools and technology are only provided for, at least right now, for the in-demand occupations. And it's an evolving set of information. So not all of the in-demand occupations have the tools and technology component to it yet. But the DOL folks are actually working on this and hope to populate this information into the in-demand occupations and perhaps even for all of the ONET occupations at some point in time. All right, so we can see that for this occupation, the tools used are listed there: hypodermic needles, nebulizers, patient care beds, and so on. And then technology as well: calendar and scheduling software, database user interface and query software, and so on. And this is really helpful for people because people who want to go into this occupation need to know what kind of tools and technology they'll need to know about. Training institutions need to know about this so that they can provide the skills to the people who are in the training programs so they are familiar with the tools and technology needed within this occupation. So it's real helpful from a variety of different perspectives. More information on the knowledge areas. For this occupation, English language is important, medicine and dentistry, customer and personal service, therapy and counseling, and so on. And then also the skills: active listening, reading comprehension, time management, writing. The work context: face-to-face discussions, structured versus unstructured work, coordinate or lead others, and so on. And then we have job zone. And just a quick review on job zone, it's just an indicator of the amount of education, training, and experience that's required, generally required by people who work in that occupation. And it goes from a job zone of 1, which is the lowest level, to a job zone of 5, which is the very highest level. And we can see that this occupation of licensed practical, licensed vocational nurse is a job zone of 3, which is medium preparation needed. And then we have information on the interests and work styles. And so the interest areas that are associated with this occupation are social and realistic investigative. And those are based on the Hollins Vocational Personality Theory, which basically divides up the interest areas into 6 different groupings: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And so the dominant interest areas for all the ONET occupations are associated with 1 or more of the interest areas. Then we have work styles. Work styles: concern for others, dependability, stress tolerance, attention to detail, and so on. Work values. You can see that work values that are associated with this occupation are relationships and achievement. And then a section that I like a lot is related occupations. So if you're working with someone, and we're kind of looking at licensed practical, licensed vocational nurses as an occupation that is one of great interest to the individual. But when they look at all the information, they're saying, well, maybe not. Maybe something close, something related, but I don't think I'm interested in this occupation, but I want to see something kind of in that same ballpark. So what ONET does for you is it provides you the related occupations to the occupation that's being looked at. And what you can do is click on any of those occupational titles and you can find the summary report with all the kind of information that I just showed you about licensed practical, licensed vocational nurses, but you can find it for these related occupations. So that's really helpful for someone who's into the career decision-making aspect, or even making a career decision, career transition rather, going from a current occupation to looking toward a different kind of occupation that's in sort of the same category. So again, very useful information. Also, wages and employment trends. You can get additional information about that. So at the national level, you can get the wages. You can see that this particular occupation is growing at an average rate between 9 and 17%. You can see what the projected need is for this occupation at the national level. But also, you see there that you can actually select a state and find this information for the state that you are living in or the state of the person who you are assisting. So, for example, you can find the wages and employment trends for the state of Maryland or Idaho or Illinois or Oregon. So you can see it for any state of interest. And also you can see their sources of additional information. And what we have here is links to related professional associations generally that deal within the particular occupation that you're looking at. So we see here we have the National Association for Practical Nurse Education and Service, National Federation of Licensed Practical Nurses, National League for Nursing, and so on. And again, here you just click on that professional association title, and you can find out more about what that association does and gain contact information as well. All right, that is the Find Occupations tool. And the next tool I want to show you is how you can search by skill areas. So you have students or clients that want to utilize particular skills in an occupation, and they want to find out which occupations match up with those skills. Well, ONET provides that tool as well. You would go back to the home page for ONET Online, and instead of using the Find Occupations area, you would use the Skill Search. So you would click on Skill Search, and up comes a laundry list of skills that are associated with the ONET system. So we have basic skills, we have complex problem-solving skills, resource management skills, system skills, technical skills. And what a person would do is go through that listing and check off those skills that they have and want to utilize in a job, or they hope to obtain at some point in time and utilize on the job. And so, again, looking through that listing, they would click off certain of the skills. Some skills are selected, some are not. And then they would get a listing of matches to the input that they provided. And you can see the listing of occupations. In this instance, there are a bunch of occupations that a person can look at that seem to match up to one degree or another with the skills input that they provided. And they can take any of those occupational titles and click on the occupational title and get that summary report that we were looking at before. What they also get, if you take a look at that left-hand column, they can see the number of skills that are matched in regard to the ones that they put in. In the middle column there, we can see the job zone associated with the occupation that pops up on the list. So they can actually make a decision here in terms of how good the match is versus the job zone, and then take a look at, kind of scale down the listing to take a look at only those occupations that match up with their criteria the best. All right, another tool is I want to show you how to search by those ONET descriptors. And so we're going to use the interest area as the example. All right, we would go back to the Find Occupations portion of ONET Online. And again, focusing on that bottom left-hand section, Browse by ONET Descriptor, you can see we can browse by knowledge, skills, abilities, work activities, interests, and work values. And the process that I'm going to show you is pretty much what you do for each of those 6 categories. But we're going to focus on interests too, because it's quite straightforward. And so if you understand the straightforward way of doing it, some of the others are a little bit more complex in terms of there's more information that you need to go through. But let's take a look at interests. So we would click on interests, and up would come a listing that shows interests, and it is then further defined according to those 6 areas that I talked about earlier: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. But you can see here that we can, again, click on knowledge, skills, abilities, work activities, and also the work values, and do the same kind of thing. All right, of the interests, what a person would do is look at the listing and look at the definitions, and If need be, they can take an interest inventory, such as the interest profiler, which is provided by DOL, or any of the other Holland-based or RIASEC-based instruments that are available for purchase and use in the career development field. All right, what the person is asked to do is click on one of those six, the one that seems to be most related to their interest area, and so we're picking conventional. And we would click on conventional, and the screen would look something like this. Several things to see here. First, I want to point you to the section that's kind of highlighted in that beige or yellow. All right, you can see that the first interest code is listed as conventional, so that comes up automatically. And what happens there is then the list of occupations that we see are all associated with the interest area of conventional. And as you can see, we can click on any of those occupations and get more information. We can also sort the list. If you take a look at that job zone section, we are asking, you can see the drop-down box is saying the word all. So we're getting all of the occupations in the ONET system associated with the interest area of conventional. But we can hone the job zone down to any of the five. So if you only want to look at job zone 3 occupations, for example, you can click on that menu and select 3. And the list then will refresh itself, providing you only those occupations that are associated with, first, the conventional interest area, and secondly, the job zone of 3. And you can take a look at all of those job zones, but you can see they're rank ordered on the listing when we're asking for all of the occupations from a job zone of 1, and then it would go to the job zone of 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Another thing that you can do is to select a second interest area. And so you have 5 of the 6 left. So a person can select any of the other 5 as a secondary interest area. And then the list would resort itself to provide those occupations that are associated with conventional and the second area that they've selected. And it would list it by job zone. You can sort it by job zone if you want, but then you can click on the occupational title and get that summary report. You can also pick a third interest area as well, and then see those occupations that are associated with all 3 of those interest areas. All right, another resource that I want you to know about, and first let me mention, and then those other descriptors function in the same way. You click on knowledge, for example, and knowledge bursts out into subcategories, and you would pick those subcategories that you want to take a look at, and you gain a listing of occupations that match up with those areas. All right, other resources that I want to show you that are based on ONET and can be reached either on their own or through ONET Online, because there are links to them. And the one that I'm going to focus on most is America's Career Information Network, which is accessible by that URL shown there, acinet.org. And you can see that there are an enormous number of resources that you can access, such as occupational information, industry information, state information, and also career videos. And I want to show you a little bit about what you can find. So the first thing we're going to look at is occupational information. And focusing on that left-hand column, you can see that we can get occupational profiles. We can do military to civilian occupation translation. We can focus on tools and technology. We can identify the fastest growing occupations, those with the most openings, largest employment, declining employment, highest paying. We can compare local wages. We can compare metropolitan wages or city wages. We can compare employment trends, find industry occupation trends, find other career tools and videos and state information and so on. I actually do a whole webinar based on some of those tools, so we're not going to focus on those tools in any detail today. But I did want you to know that they were there and they were available to you. And if you have not looked at that, I would suggest going to that website and just poking around for half an hour or so, and you'll see the wondrous number of and quality of resources that are at your fingertips just for spending some time on the Internet. I did want to make special mention of the career videos. Again, these are really wonderful resources. There are around 600 or so videos. They're focused on career clusters and specific careers. They tend to be about 3 minutes long, and in that 3 minutes or so is a wonderful capsule description of what's involved in the occupation, to include the equipment people use, the kind of work setting, the education and training requirements, and so on. And they're extremely well done. They're free. You can access them through the Internet and watch them, but you can also download them from the Internet onto your computer or onto a DVD or onto some CDs and use them in whatever way you want. So I would recommend you taking a look at those, and if they're appropriate for use in your situation, by all means, obtain them and start working with them. Another tool that one can get from America's Career Information Network is the skills gap analysis. And the skills gap analysis actually takes a fair amount of time to go through, so we're not going to actually do this tool, but I want to show you the outputs from the tool that you can get and see how useful it can be. Basically, let me go back. What basically happens is a person will take a look at the skills. There's a whole listing of skills, and they would identify what skills they have. Then the program would ask them to rate how well they can perform those skills. And once they do that, then what they can do is compare their skills and the level of their skills to any occupation within the O-Net system. And what they get as output is a listing that looks something like this. So here's an example of someone who put in their skills, who put in the level of skill that they had, and compared it to the occupation of geographer. And you get basically three different kinds of things that come out. Working from the right-hand column, you see the column is did not select. And so we have equipment selection and operations and control are skills that this individual did not indicate that they had. So if they want to become a geographer, somehow they need to become more skilled in these particular areas. Now the person can say, well, I really meant to say I had that skill, so they can go back and change things. But basically they would take a look at this and make a decision start making a decision as to whether this is an occupation that they really want to pursue further. The middle column, reading comprehension, is where you will find those skills that the person said they had, but they may not have had it at the level that is required by this particular occupation. So here's a place where some additional training or education might be necessary. In the left-hand column, which is labeled match, those are the skills that the person said they had, and they had them at the level that is required by this particular occupation. What's really neat, again, is that once a person puts in their skills information, they can go back and forth through the O-Net occupations and get their listing, get this kind of report as to how they match up with any of those occupations. It also clearly can be used as what we in education call an individual education plan. It could also be something involved with an individual career plan as well. So this can be very, very helpful to individuals to help them craft a path toward really obtaining the necessary skills and abilities required by people who work in this particular occupation. The thing that is really important is that the person be extremely thoughtful about their input, and it does take some thinking, because you actually not only say you have the skill, but you have to kind of decide on the level of skill that you have as well. And there's some assistance in determining that through this particular tool. But then again, it does take some careful thought before you provide the input. So if your input is good, the output is going to be extremely helpful. And if the input that you provide is not particularly thought through, then you have to take that into consideration when interpreting the output. All right, some other resources that are available. You can see the listing here. Career Resource Library, Certification Finder, Education Training Finder, Employability Checkup, and so on. We're going to focus on just a few of these. And first is the Education and Training. And here's what we can actually find education and training institutions that will help us with our education and training as we pursue a career. So the first thing one is asked to do is to select a job family. And so we're selecting here healthcare practitioner and technical. And then it asks the person to select the occupation within that job family. And we're selecting pharmacist. And then it says select a level of education and training that you're interested in and a location that you're interested in. And so here we have inputted all levels. We want to take a look at everything. We want to select by state, but we can select by region and zip code too, if that's most appropriate. And we're selecting the state of Michigan, so we can take a look at what's there. And up will come all the institutions that match up with that criteria that you inputted. And so we see the results here. There are 5 institutions that probably have some education and training related to the occupation of pharmacist in the healthcare professional and technical job family. So we have Eastern Michigan University, Ferris State, University of Michigan, and so on. And so by clicking on that little icon at the far right, we can view the details involved with each of these institutions and see what kinds of programs they offer, probably information on the student body, some of the extracurricular activities. You probably can get requirements, entry requirements, and how to apply, and so on. So this is really helpful for individuals. Another area is finding financial aid assistance. And so we can go to the financial aid advisor, and we can put in our criteria and then find assistance with some financial aid that might be available to us based on the criteria that we inputted. We can also gain access to student financial aid guides. And these are updated every year, and you can download these, and there's obviously a version in Spanish that is available. And so that can be very helpful. It helps individuals understand where they can get some additional financial aid in terms of scholarships and grants and loans and so on. And it helps walk them through the system and the bureaucracies involved in getting that financial aid. And again, all these things I'm showing you are free, but you can download these things for free as well. Then scholarship search. And here you can put in your criteria, and the criteria can be the award type that you want. So we can pick from awards and prizes, fellowships, grants, loans, scholarships, forgivable loans, and so on. And we've selected scholarships. We can take a look at residence preferences, and I've selected District of Columbia. Study level, I'm going to take a look at all study levels, but you can actually take a look at only doctorate schools, 4-year colleges, graduate programs, masters, others, and also by affiliation restrictions. You can see African Americans, Asian Americans, association scholarships, disabled, ethnic, Hispanic American, and so on. There's a whole list in there. So if a person thinks they might qualify within one of those categories, you can search by that as well. And according to the criteria that we use, there are 10 results, and those results are listed here. You can click on any of those scholarship names and find out more about the occupations. But you can see basically what the duration is, the number of awards that are given, the deadline for applying for those financial aid and those scholarships and so on. So that's real helpful as a screen as well. All right, and I made just passing reference to the career assessment tools, and I'm not going to go into these in detail because we do extensive webinars on these assessment tools. But just to indicate to you, so that you're aware, there are 3 very high-quality assessment tools that the Department of Labor provides for you. They're to be used for career exploration and career guidance, but not for job selection and selection to job training programs. And you can download them from onetcenter.org. And so I would recommend that you at least take a look at them. And again, you can download them, print them out, and use them. First one is the interest profiler, and that basically relates to this whole notion of what do you like to do. And it's based on Holland's vocational personality theory. And I talked about this earlier, that people and occupations can generally be divided into at least one of 6 of the areas, and generally to some degree all of the 6 areas, but some of those areas are more dominant than others within the people and within the occupations. And that people who are working in occupations that satisfy their interests tend to be happier, stay on the job longer, and they're more productive. And so, again, it's realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. So taking the interest profiler, we can identify our dominant interest areas, and we can match that up to occupations. And you saw in the summary report that I showed you that interest level and interest information is provided, and you can actually search for occupations based on those interests. Then we have the work importance profiler and locator, and that's what do you value, your job values. And those are achievement, independence, recognition, relationships, support, and working conditions. And then we have the ability profiler, which is what can you do, what are your work-related skills. And this is a more complex instrument. It's standardized. It requires a test administrator, where the other 2 can be self-administered and self-scored. The other 2 are also available for downloading in a computerized version. The ability profiler is not. It's merely a paper pencil instrument because it's standardized, and by that, the timing has to be exactly right, the environment has to be exactly right, the directions have to be consistent, and so on. So you have to follow all of the instructions in the administrator's manual for this. All right, it basically has 11 subtests. They're divided up into psychomotor and non-psychomotor. They're also divided up into power tests and speeded tests, with power tests being those that there's sufficient time given so that most people can answer most of the items. And so it's kind of what do you know. The speeded tests are how fast and how quickly can you do these particular tasks or answer these particular items. So in this instance, it's not a generous amount of time given. It's, again, seeing how fast and accurately people can work. You see the various titles of the 11 subtests: arithmetic, reasoning, vocabulary, 3-dimensional space, and so on. The ones on the right-hand side, the last 4, place, turn, assemble, and disassemble, require some equipment. The others are paper-pencil instruments. Again, we actually do a 3-webinar series on the ability profiler. It's first kind of an overview of the ability profiler. Second is how to administer the ability profiler. And the third webinar is how to interpret the ability profiler results. So if you're interested in those, be on the lookout for the webinars that we do on the ability profiler. With all these 3 instruments, what happens is that you get a listing of occupations that match up with the person's results. So all three of these assessments do that. So it links up to the occupations within the ONET system. And then you can go back to ONET Online. You can put in that occupational title from the listing that you get, the one that is particularly intriguing to you or to the person that you're working with, and you can get that summary report that we walked through at the very beginning of this webinar. So it kind of links all this information together, which is pretty cool. I also did want to show you that ONET information is part of the Career Cluster system. And some of you, particularly those of you that are in the education arena, are probably aware of the U.S. Department of Education's efforts dividing up the world of work basically into career clusters, 16 career clusters. And within each of those clusters are career pathways. And I'm going to just slowly go through the listing of the 16 to just show you. So I'm not going to talk my way through the list, but just show you the listing. So you can see we're starting with agriculture, food, and natural resources. And then if you look down that list, you can see what the other ones are. And then we have another set starting with finance and ending with information technology. And then the last listing, which starts with law, public safety, and corrections and security, and goes through transportation, distribution, and logistics. All right, I do want to show you kind of how the ONET occupations come into play. So here we're looking at the arts, audiovisual technology, and communications cluster. And we can see in this section a bunch of occupations that are listed, but they're organized according to the career pathways. So if you look at that bottom row, you see the occupations within this cluster, but in the pathway of audio and video technology and film. Then we have printing technology, visual arts and performing arts, and journalism and broadcasting, and then the pathway of telecommunications. So again, by using the occupational titles here, you can go back into ONET Online and find out more about those occupations. Now, the occupations don't match up exactly with the occupational titles used in the ONET system. So in some instances, you may need to use some keywords in order to get further information. All right, I want to just summarize that what we've kind of done here is review some of the tools that are available to you that you can use with students and clients to help them on their career exploration, their career transition, and so on. And so we've also looked at the various standards and guidelines that are out there that try to produce quality programs and try to influence the production of quality programs. We've looked at how to find occupational information, search by skills, interest area, look at financial aid, look at scholarship information. We took a look at 3 assessment tools that are available, and we looked at information on career clusters and showing you how ONET has a relationship to that. And so basically, what I hope is I've given you some tools and reminded me of the old adage that give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So we looked at those tools. I showed you a little bit about how they're used. But if you go into those tools, you can see that there's even more information that you can extract or mine from what is provided there. So I encourage you to go back to each of those tools that I showed you and see what more they can do. You can see the availability of other tools within the system that you can utilize as well. So I want to stop and see if you have any questions, and if you do, please go ahead and enter them into the chat box. And as you do that, I want to mention a couple other things. If you download the slides, which are going to be archived probably by the end of the day today or at the latest Monday, and you can see all the URLs for the tools that I've shown you. I also want to make sure that you are aware of some wonderful opportunities for you. We really want to focus in the next several months on ONET users. And so we have 3 ways that we want to do this. First is the Spotlight. And the Spotlight is one of the ONET and Mayer consultants will give you a call and chat with you for a while. And out of that, she will create a basic description of who you are, where you work, how you use ONET, and even include personal information like hobbies and stuff on your kids and so on. And it's really nice to be able to read those spotlights and see something about the other users and what they're doing. We focus on how people use ONET more specifically in 2 things that I'm involved with, which is the creation of some podcasts, which is basically an audio interview. And what I would do is call you up. We would chat for a little while. From that, I would develop a list of interview questions and send it off to you to think about. And then I would call you again at some agreed-upon point in time, and we would do a formal run-through. So we would actually handle the interview as if it was live in front of an audience. But it's just the 2 of us talking on the phone at that point. And then once we're both comfortable with all that, we would call into a conference call number, and then Gary, who has been helping us with this webinar, is on the other end of the line, and he will actually record the interview. And at that point, it would get posted onto a Mayer & Mayer website, and a link to that would go out to the ONET community, and they could listen to the podcast. And the podcast is 6 to 8 minutes a time, so it's not extensive at all. So it's quick snippets of how people are using the ONET information, ONET assessment tools, and so on. And then also, I've been doing these webinars for years now, and we want to start focusing on users and highlighting how users are actually working with the ONET system and having users present some information in a webinar framework. So I'm looking for people in a variety of different areas to take 15 minutes or so to, we'll create PowerPoint slides together, and we'll let you present the information in terms of how you are using ONET so that other people out there can get some good ideas from what you're doing, and they can actually incorporate some of those ideas within their own work situation. So I'm looking for people really on any topic, resume writing, using ONET for the older worker, the military in transition, people doing research in the field, really anything. It's totally open-ended. And if you are interested in any of these opportunities, first for the Spotlight, you see the email that you need to send this gal a message. Her name is Bonnie Stinson. And you need to contact her and saying, I'm interested, and she will contact you from that point. You see my email address, which is sagesolutions@earthlink.net, and I really want to hear from you saying that you're interested in doing a podcast with me or doing a portion of a webinar. We would hook you up with 2 other people, and each having about 12 to 15 minutes of time. I would moderate that webinar, and the audience could ask some questions, and really we'll have a good time. And it's nothing to be threatened about. It's really quite easy and relaxing. So I would really encourage you to share the good things that you're doing with other people in the field so that we can maximize the use of ONET within the career development world. And so those of you that are educators or counselor educators, workforce development professionals, please send me an email saying, yes, I'm interested, let's talk about this. Again, sagesolutions@earthlink.net. And when we conclude this webinar, I'm hoping to see 5, 10 emails in my mailbox from you. So again, don't be shy about this. Share the information with other people, again, so that they can do a better job with their students and clients. So with that, I haven't seen any questions come in. Still open to receiving questions. I did want to mention that we do have additional webinars that we do periodically, and these are some of the titles of the webinars. And again, I'd sure like for you to be involved in the webinars as well. So with that, gosh, not seeing any questions come in. I want to say thank you very much for your attention and participation in this webinar, and I hope to see you in future webinars. Have a wonderful day.